A recovery mission is now underway for 6 people still missing after the collapse of Baltimore's Francis Scott Key Bridge. It's been more than a day since the Dali cargo ship crashed into the bridge, bringing it down. Our reporter, Luis Martinez, is live on the scene still. Luis, great to see you here. What can you tell us about the situation currently?
Good evening, Steve. Yes, as you just mentioned, as of late last night, this is no longer a search and rescue mission. It's a recovery operation. The divers went into the water earlier this morning. During the night, search was suspended because of safety concerns. And throughout today, it's been rainy, making the water very choppy and murky and making the work for divers more difficult. Let's listen to what Governor Wes Moore had to say about this 6 missing people.
Now that we've transitioned into a recovery mission, I promised them the same, that I will exhaust all options to be able to bring them a sense of closure.
From the 6 people that are missing, they all were part of a construction crew that was working on the Francis Scott Key Bridge when it collapsed. We also know that the 6 missing people are from different nationalities. We do know that there are 3 Mexicans, Guatemalan, and Honduran nationals from the people that are missing. We also heard from the National Transportation Safety Board earlier today. They have finally boarded the cargo ship, the Dali, and it's important to note that the crew members of the Dali have not unboarded off the ship. They remain inside. The NTSB, the National Transportation Safety Board, is conducting interviews of the crew members and also retrieve the data recorder, Steve, where they're going to get all that information of those minutes before the crash. Let's listen to what Jennifer Homedy, the chairwoman of the National Transportation Safety Board, had to say about the investigation.
Right now, the NTSB has a lot of expertise and experience in investigating bridge strikes and bridge collapses going back to 1967. So we have a lot of expertise at the agency. With this particular bridge, we will focus on this particular bridge and look at the structure. We will look at fenders. We will look at areas that should have been in place to prevent this type of destruction from occurring. That will be part of our investigation here.
Steve, we have also learned that the cargo ship Dali had propulsion issues last year in June when it was docked at the port of San Antonio in Chile. And then the Chilean Navy had to conduct inspections and give them the go-ahead to leave that port. But it has had issues with propulsion in the past, and that will be important to note in the investigations going forward. Also, Steve, the Baltimore harbor is closed because there's no way out. The bridge, the collapsed bridge and the cargo ship are blocking the waterway. There's currently 10 ships stuck inside of the Baltimore harbor, and of course the Baltimore port will not be operating as regularly. This is the 9th largest port in the country, the 2nd largest exporter of coal in the United States, and it will of course have important economic consequences. Steve, back to you.
Still so much circling around this whole incident. It's really unfortunate that the weather there is not cooperating for the search and rescue. Really fascinating that the whole crew and everything, and understandable as the investigation plays out, has still not deboarded the ship. Everybody's still there. Everything's still intact. Singapore says it will launch its own probe into the Dali container ship. That's in addition to supporting U.S. authorities by sending a crew to Baltimore. So we'll be keeping an eye on that. In a statement today, Singapore's Port Authority said the vessel passed 2 overseas inspections last year and had certificates validating its structural integrity. The ship had reportedly dropped its anchors just prior to its collision with the bridge as part of its emergency procedures. And the federal government is working to reopen the Port of Baltimore and to rebuild that bridge. President Biden vowing to allocate federal funds and resources to these goals. NTD's Jack Bradley is live at the White House. Good evening, Jack. We'll be going back to Jack in just a moment. In the meantime, we do have an interview that we're going to toss this to right now. Let's take a look. So what factors are behind the collapse of the bridge, and what is the economic impact? To join me to discuss the interview that I just mentioned, Professor James Moore, who specializes in transportation engineering and infrastructure systems. Professor James Moore, thank you so much for joining.
My pleasure.
Professor, the Francis Scott Key Bridge is the third longest, or was the third longest, continuous truss bridge in the world. Do you think it was the force of impact where the bridge was hit, or ultimately the bridge's design, that made it crumble within seconds? And did anything surprise you when you watched what happened at the point of impact?
The bridge was conventionally designed, but it was well designed. It was in good repair. It had been inspected routinely. For the last 30 years or so, its condition has varied between very good and on the good side of fair, which is fairly representative of a lot of U.S. infrastructure right now. I really don't know how you would design any bridge, long truss or otherwise, to sustain the kind of impact that it received. So I think the design of the bridge was sound. I think the condition of the bridge was sound. I think that it collapsed because of the amazing amount of force that was imparted on it.
The bridge, as you mentioned, is reportedly and was in good repair, but it was 77 years old. Are bridges, do you think, in the U.S. in need of potentially new standards, or would you say that the standards are still applicable?
Bridge research is constantly moving forward. There are a number of design alternatives that are considered and investigated by engineers, and there's constant improvement taking place. But the fact that there's improvement available going forward doesn't mean that existing designs are largely deficient. Bridges are, many of them are vulnerable where the decks stand on pilings. And maybe if that bridge had had special reinforcements, it wouldn't have collapsed, but there'd be no reason to provide special reinforcements. If you're going to prevent a ship from hitting it, you would build barriers around the pylons that support it. You would put foundations down to the seabed, and you'd raise up columns that would preclude the ship from ever getting to the pylon. That would be much more likely to succeed than a reinforcement scheme. So yes, we do research on bridges because we want to build better bridges, because public safety is job one, because we want to produce cost-effective infrastructure and produce as much infrastructure as we can because it benefits people. But I can't really feel apprehensive about driving over a bridge that was built in the 70s and has been well maintained.
Professor Moore, you specialize in economic impact analysis, specifically relating to transportation engineering. How will the Francis Scott Key Bridge collapse impact the economy locally and throughout the country?
But there's reason to expect that the economy will adjust. At least it'll take some time to make it possible to move in and out of that port, and as a result, there's going to have to be an alternative for traffic. But the market for international trade will operate, and those alternatives will emerge. Baltimore's also got a significant container presence. I mean, the Dolly is a container ship, and it was a fully loaded container ship. So what makes Baltimore really unusual is that A, it's reasonably large, and B, it's highly diverse in terms of the kind of cargo it handles. But the good news is, because it's highly diverse, that presents an alternative for a share of the cargo with respect to the nation's other ports.
Professor James Moore, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for watching the Capitol Report. If you want to see our full broadcast, check us out at epochtv.com.